let's go through all of the books that I read in October. Stop it. Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Sinead and this is my spooky corner of YouTube, where I talk about the spooky books that I've read, the spooky films that I've watched, and share the spooky shenanigans I get up to on a day-to-day basis. And today I have my reading wrap-up of all of the books that I got through in October. I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books in total. 12! Now I will say that 9 of those are full books. 2 of them are incredibly short books. They are classed as books. Some people would refer to them as short stories, but we got through them. And there was one at the end that I did read, but I have notes on it, and it is a biggie for some of you. So we'll save that to the end. It was an incredibly busy reading month for me because I was trying to get through a few Halloween reads. I had quite a few books to read ahead of an event that I did in October where I was hosting a panel of horror authors in Waterstones that went very well, and it was wonderful, and I needed to read their books and research them, and also just throwing in some random ones because I am a mood reader, and that's gonna happen. I did, of course, have lots of plans for the books I was gonna read in October. Did I read those specific ones that I said a couple of months ago that I would read? You know, it's very easy to criticize. So October was full of sort of work assignments, really, but it was still joyful, still got a lot of good books in there, and some really interesting ones that will definitely make future lists for great spooky season reading. Or you can, of course, read them into the winter if you want to keep that spooky feeling alive. I've just realized I haven't turned on my backlight. It's fine, I'll do that now. I was charging it. Ooh, look, as if by magic. Just a little glimpse behind the scenes of what goes into making my videos. Backlights like this help the editing process, and it does make the picture a bit crisper. In my head, you may get to this and then go, there is no difference whatsoever, Sinead. In fact, this is worse, and we hate you now. We clearly have a lot to get through today, so this is a quick reminder to please subscribe to my channel, like this video, leave a comment below with what you enjoyed reading in October, and also with suggestions or recommendations of videos that we can be doing into the winter. The first book that I got through in October is a solid Halloween one. It is All Hallows by Christopher Golden. Now this was on my spooky season list because I wanted something that was set on Halloween night, that had a lot of Halloween scares in it, had all the vibes, and this book definitely delivers. All Hallows is set in 1984 in a town in Massachusetts. It is a town where there is a scare attraction that one family puts on every single year, a huge haunted woodland attraction. This family is about to move out of the area. They have some issues internally, and also several of the other households and the families in the area are also dealing with their own personal problems. You have teenagers who are just trying to find their identity and develop their friendships or romantic relationships. You have parents who are on the verge of splitting up. You have real battles between some of them about affairs, about money, about drinking, about loneliness, about lies and secrets amongst them. All of this domestic drama is bubbling along the street as the Haunted Woods attraction prepares to open for the last time. But on this night, there's also the appearance of several children in the neighborhood that don't seem to belong there. They are asking for help, and they are trying to avoid running into someone called the Cunning Man. Each chapter is a different perspective of the different residents along the street, and there are quite a few. You have a core selection of both teenagers and also adults, and their perception of what is going on around them as we move steadily through Halloween night, and hauntings and strange occurrences start to increase. There are unsettling human events taking place, and there are also some very, very creepy happenings with these kids and this lurking presence of the Cunning Man who starts to appear. My journey with All Hallows was an interesting one. Overall, I did enjoy it most of the way through, and there were segments that I really enjoyed more than others. First off, there is a lot going on in this book. You have a real combination of what I would call domestic drama, and with all of the infighting and the battles and the pettiness and out arguments between the different families and the different teenagers. You have this underlying story of something a bit sinister with one set of neighbors that you're not quite sure about, stuff that the kids whisper about them, and is it true or is it just kids acting up a little bit on Halloween night? And then you have these strange children appearing and whispering about the Cunning Man, and it is very clear that something is very wrong and not of this world with those children and this figure that is starting to appear. But what is the story there? The book had a lot of setup with the different characters, and it's really focused on the human drama first and foremost. And in the end, that pays off. You do have to stick with it a bit, and I was feeling in the early chapters, and as we were getting through the book, I'm like, okay, we're spending a lot of time with these people, and not a lot of scary stuff has happened. But that's not not to say that the stories of all of the different characters aren't well written and the different levels of drama they're experiencing. I'm calling it drama because I don't really want to give too much away about what is actually happening in the street and the different dramas that they're going through and the gossip and all sorts of things. It is a lot to get through, and then you get to the sort of second half of the book where the hauntings and the horror really ramps up, and it really does ramp up, and it's creative, it's inventive, it's unsettling, it's chilly, and it turns your perspective as you go along. It is not as straightforward as you think it is. You may have sort of thoughts of going, oh, okay, I see where this is going. And it goes in many, many different directions. This is very much a story about who is the real villain here. Who is the real villain in any haunting? What is the real horror that we face every day? It's not too heavy-handed with its metaphors. And as I said, overall, I actually really enjoyed the book, and I thought it was a very good spooky story. It being set in 1984, it doesn't have a lot of nostalgia vibes with it. I actually kept forgetting what timeline we were in. Does it need to have more kind of, real nods to this being the 80s? It wouldn't have hurt, to be honest. But I don't know whether that was just a plot device to say, there's no mobile phones. I think All Hallows is probably around about a 4-star, though for me it's about a 3.75, merely because that initial setup I felt was taking a very long time. I was being expected to care about a lot of people and a lot of their different nuances and the lives they were going through. The originality of the horror made this book work. It actually wanted more of the backstory of some of the horror that was going on there. I can't give too much away, but definitely this is a good, solid, interesting horror book to read for Halloween. If you haven't read it, you can absolutely read it now to keep Halloween alive in your heart, or put it on your list for next year. It would be a great one to get you in the mood for the season. Next, I read a short book by an author I've really come to enjoy, and this ended up being possibly my favourite book by them ever. It was The Cold House by A.G. Slatter. This is a story about hauntings, it's a story about grief, it has elements of folk horror in there, it has lots of twists and turns packed into such a short, little, scary book, and I loved my time with it. I rated this 5 stars, it's 4.5 to 5 stars, and I don't mind being generous with this sort of book. Maybe a couple of things could have been drawn out differently, but I did really enjoy my time with it. The Cold House is the story of a writer, Everly, who has, at the beginning of the book, lost her husband and her child in a tragic accident. She is going through the different stages of grief, sort of shuffling around her life, thinking about how she's going to move on. But then she gets information from a lawyer that she has never heard of before, informing her that her husband wasn't quite who he said he was, and she has been left an awful lot of money, and she will be a very comfortable woman. And this lawyer appears in her life with lots of help and lots of suggestions of how she can take some time out to process her grief. He suggests she goes to this beautiful country house he knows of. He will set it up for her. She can go there and rest and recuperate for a time. This house is on an island off the coast of England, a nice, cozy, very cutesy community. But when she arrives, she finds out this house is actually a mansion. And why is she at this mansion, and how does he have access to it? But no sooner has she arrived, she starts to sense the presence of her daughter. And she is wondering if her daughter is haunting her and how she can communicate with her. The longer she stays in the mansion, she senses presence around her, but also that this mansion may have a history, and the community as well start to reveal what has gone on in the past in this area, with this combination of very, very cozy, cute scenes and very kind of, ooh, that's unsettling about what happened on this island in the past. And it builds to spooky, spooky shenanigans. You would be right in thinking that sounds like a lot for a short book, and it truly is. A lot is packed into this tale, and it goes into very interesting, original, bizarre places that I 100% enjoyed. I was here for it. What I think worked about this book is I really appreciated the way A.G. Slatter wrote Everly, the main character. Everly's character was quiet, was almost sort of walking through life in a daze, and there was elements of humor to her. She was witty, she was funny, of trying to get through the process of grief. And it could have been a story where the main character could have been, over the top, racked with grief and fear and running around and what's going on. It could have been such a two-dimensional character, and I actually really liked Everly, and I liked the witty way that she was written, and I liked the world building around it. I liked the characters that were created. They felt fully formed. Yes, they were moving the plot along. It's a short book. It has to move along at a pace. But I enjoyed all of them, and I enjoyed the time spent there. For me, this just worked so well as a great ghost story novella that was fun and crazy in parts. It gave me everything I wanted, and I was so impressed. A.G. Slatter has, of course, written the Sourdough universe, and I am listening to and reading at the same time the fourth book in that series, The Crimson Road. I started that this month, but I'm giving myself more time to finish it because the Sourdough universe books by this author, they are more fantasy, elements of horror in there, but a bigger world building. Not huge books, but very enjoyable. Cold House, a great one, would serve very well into winter because it's cold. Next, I went into the world of YA slashers. One of the authors on the panel that I hosted this month was Bill Wood, and I wanted to read both of his books. Last year he brought out Let's Split Up, and this year's release is the sequel, Be Right Back. These are YA slashers, and they are described as Scooby-Doo meets Scream, which is a sentiment we can all get on board with. The books are set in the early 2000s as well, so you get those nice nostalgia vibes. The premise of Let's Split Up, we have our all-American town, and we have our all-American high school, and we have a manor house, Carrington Manor, that sits on the edge of town, and there are legends and ghost stories associated with it. The Carrington Ghoul is said to stalk it. And at the beginning of the book, a teenage couple who are trying to film some ghost hunting content at the manor are killed, or murdered by the ghoul, it seems. And it will be down to 4 friends from high school, 3 who have been pals for a while, and the new girl called Buffy, to try and solve the mystery. As more killings occur, people start to disappear, and legends start to emerge about the manor. Be Right Back returns us to the town after the events of the first book. We have our plucky crime fighters and our ghost hunters together again. They have moved on with their lives, but the town is now the home to a big festival every Halloween by true crime nuts, by ghost nuts who are obsessed with what happened at Carrington Manor in the first book and what turned out to have been the things that occurred. I can't say too much without giving it away. But now there seems to be another killer on the loose. Has the Carrington Ghoul returned? But also there are strange occurrences all linked with urban legends and myths around the town that all the teenagers know about, other ghosts and ghouls, and they seem to be making appearances too. These books were a lot of fun. These are YA slashers, and absolutely that description of Scooby-Doo meets Scream is very apt here. Let's Split Up felt like a nice nod to the point horror books that I read as a kid, and Be Right Back, I really enjoyed the urban legends and the creativity around the new hauntings that took place in this book. And is it a haunting? Is it a murder? It was a nice vibe. If you want an easy to consume, quick slasher, these are simple. They are a bit young for me, and that's no shade on YA. Please let me make that very clear, because actually one of my favorite books of this year was a YA book. It's aimed at that particular age group. It feels like that, but the stories behind them, good fun. So yeah, these were about a sort of a 3.5 out of 5 star for me. They're the sort of books that when I was a teenager, I would have absolutely devoured and loved and would have looked for. And it's so nice to see books that are slashers, that are kind of appealing to a younger audience out there, that still have that nice homage to all of the great horror cinema that we know and the slasher cinema that we love. Next up, I read another YA slasher. It is How to Survive a Horror Movie. I listened to the audiobook of this, again, ahead of the event in London, and was really blown away by how much I like this. I ended up listening to this on a long car journey with some friends, and I often put my audiobook on and while they sort of sleep or doze while I'm driving, and my friends just kept sort of whispering kind of over going, "Do you reckon it's this guy? What do you think's happening here?" Everyone got really invested in the story. It was a mark of a good audiobook. How to Survive a Horror Movie is set in a school on a creepy remote island, which is always good. Our protagonist is Charlie, and she is a horror movie expert. She and her best friend Olive spend their evenings watching horror movies. They know all of the tropes, they know all of the rules. But then people start dying at the school. One by one, students are being picked off at the school, suffering horrible bloody deaths. And Charlie fears that she may be at the center of a horror movie herself, and she knows the tricks to survive a horror movie. There's certain things that you should do and the things that you shouldn't. The only trouble is the ghosts seem to be haunting Charlie. The ghosts of the deceased girls appear around her in a series of strange noises and shapes that are very well written in the book. And Charlie realizes she is the key to solving who is behind these murders and why are these people being killed. This book, again, is giving you Scream vibes. It's giving you fear-stricken Street vibes. It gives you that high school setting on that remote island with like touches of the Gothic in there, but it's fast and it's funny as well. The central characters, Charlie, her friend Olive, they are very witty, and the cattiness between all of the students there as they're trying to solve the mysteries and, you know, also fend off the interference of the different teachers is very funny and very nicely played out. I like the dialogue in that. The deaths in this are bloody and brutal and inventive, and I liked that. The fact that this is a YA book, it doesn't sort of hold back and go, no, we need to spare them. No, there are severed heads. There are people being pushed onto railings. It's great if you like that sort of thing. And I say that as the gore isn't over the top. It's just very slasher worthy. It was enjoyable. It was fun. It had twists and turns. And if you've watched my previous video of me carving a pumpkin for Halloween night, I was listening to the end of the book and I had my jaw open when I heard the final twists. And the sequel to this book is out as well, How to Survive a Horror sequel. And this one is set in a village that is associated with witchcraft and darkness there. So I kind of want a piece of that too. It was a good month for enjoyable slashers. How to Survive a Horror movie was a solid 4 stars for me. I think there were elements of it that were a little bit too long. It was focused on the relationships and the friendships, which absolutely would work for a YA audience. It's just not something that's particularly my cup of tea at the moment. Next up, another Halloween worthy read. This was Hallows Hill. This is a thriller / folk horror book. I started, wasn't sure, then really liked, then what, then ended up really enjoying this, again with notes, but this was a surprising victory in terms of my reading. What? It was a month of surprises, honestly. The story of Hallows Hill is that 20 years ago, from what will be the main point of this book, is that a group of teenagers go to the standing stones of the town where they live. And they're going to go there and they are going to do the famous ritual that people talk about, that teenagers do as a rite of passage. They are going to whisper and try and summon the spirit that is said to haunt the standing stones. We are following our protagonist Mia as she goes to the group. And while it seems that she truly has summoned the spirit, there is something more worrying that has taken place. One of their group has been murdered. One of the teenagers is killed that night at the Standing Stones. The group have no idea about it, but of course the finger of suspicion is pointed at them. We read in the book newspaper clippings that have all point towards different occult groups that have said that something has been summoned there and claiming that different devils are responsible for it. We see that the court cases have taken place of people accused of the murder and also the backlash that has faced this group. 20 years later, the rest of the now adults meet up once again at home in their hometown on Halloween night. But Mia is driven to find out what happened that night, and she hasn't told her friends that she has been haunted ever since that day by a very upsetting figure. At this meeting, one of the group decide they want to hold a seance to see if they can contact the other side, and the result of the seance is that a spirit from beyond delivers a prophecy that they will all be dead by Christmas, and soon deaths start occurring. The blurb of All Hallows is really short. It really does just focus on the fact that these teenagers went to the Standing Stones, someone died, and 20 years later they're sort of still asking questions. And it sort of does a disservice to what is a jam-packed book that really does combine thriller and folk horror elements to it. The start of the book was fine to me. I thought we were just sort of on this journey of, okay, well, what happened at the Standing Stones and who killed the friend and was there something else in there? And then it was like, oh no, there's actual hauntings. Wait a minute, occult groups all are linked to this site? And there's a history there, and there's so much going on, and as I said, really good folk horror elements that I just didn't see coming, wasn't expecting, to be honest, and was very pleasantly surprised. At the same time, you have this thriller thread running through it as the group are told, oh, you're all going to be dead by Christmas. So does that mean someone's after them? Does that mean that there is a malevolent force working to kill them to make it seem like they're all dying accidental deaths one by one? Or is it like a Final Destination style? Or is it a killer in their midst? Is someone exacting revenge? Does someone know something? Overall, really enjoyed the book. Did it stick the landing? I don't think it did in the end, but I think the journey there ended up being really satisfying. If it's a helpful description, it feels like this book was written as if it absolutely intends to be a TV drama. It has put everything in there. It's almost like you're visualizing this on screen. And that's not to detract from it, because it made it very enjoyable. I think that there could have been more nuance at points in the story. It is absolutely jam-packed. Hallows Hill, good for Halloween, but also good for the rest of the year. It is set in winter and it builds up to the denouement of Christmas. So you could read that right now and get your folk horror thrills on. I think Hallows Hill is a 4-star. While I had a few niggles with it, you can't fault it for the plot and how much was packed in. Meh. This is your friendly reminder that if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so you can be notified of my next videos coming up, leave a comment and let me know any other videos you'd like to see from me in the future. Are there book recommendations of specific genres that you are itching to get into? I can give you a cream or give you recommendations. Now on to the 2 very short reads that I did this month. These are still classed as books, though I think you would be forgiven for saying they're short stories, so I just want to be clear about that. I wanted to revisit the classics this month and dive into some I haven't read before, and so I picked up The Vampyre by John Polidori. This is a very shiny one, but you can see it just up here, but I'll put it up here. John Polidori's The Vampyre, or The Vampyre, if you want to sound like Lisa from The Simpsons, is a story that was written while on holiday at Lake Geneva with Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley and Lord Byron. If you know the background of the novel Frankenstein, then you'll know that that was conceived, the story of it was conceived while all of these writers were together at Lake Geneva in the summer where there was no sunshine. It rained incessantly, and Lord Byron one night said, let's have a ghost story writing competition, and whoever gets the best one wins something. And on that night, Mary Shelley wrote the start of what would be Frankenstein, but John Polidori wrote The Vampyre. And this is the first, considered to be the first romantic vampire story in its entirety. Of course, John Polidori was influenced by vampire myths and legends from, centuries gone by, and old folk tales, as many of the writers would have been, word of mouth, these folk tales and stories of creatures. The Vampyre was said to have a huge influence on Bram Stoker's Dracula. But the story, it's short, it's tiny. I bought this little copy of it, and unbeknownst to me, the copy of Frankenstein that I have actually has a copy of The Vampyre right at the back too. So that was something. So The Vampyre is the story of a figure, a gentleman, a shady kind of beguiling man called Lord Ruthven, who arrives in London one summer, and he is amongst, as they say in there, a ton of noblemen who appear in the city, but he is so distinctive and he is very compelling. At the same time, we have this young man, Aubrey, who is coming up in society and is very attractive and is very lovely, and he crosses paths with Lord Ruthven, and Aubrey and Ruthven decide to travel and take a tour of Europe, as a young man would do in his youth. At that time, you would take a tour, you would go and visit all of the places and learn about history and the classics and literature and all their origins. As Aubrey travels through Europe, he starts to hear legends about the vampires that stalk the land, while also learning that Lord Ruthven's reputation back in London isn't as strong as he initially thought it was. There are some young ladies who feel that they have been ruined, but also some sinister goings on with him. We have Aubrey sort of deciding to part company with Lord Ruthven, meeting a lovely, angelic, beautiful girl in Greece, but she of course meets an unfortunate demise at the hands of some monstrous man who attacks her in the night. It's then a game of cat and mouse as Aubrey starts to realise that Lord Ruthven may not be quite of this world, maybe something dark and evil, and also racing back to London to save his sister, who has oddly become betrothed to a certain gentleman. It is a tiny story. It is a short story, really, though it is still marketed in places as a book. So I'm including it just for the hell of it, but I'm being upfront with it. It's worth reading so you can see the origins of the vampire story and to explore a little bit more of that romantic writing, the romanticism of how different men and women in different age groups are written, how they are the folklore versus English society. You can draw your own conclusions from it, but The Vampyre, and it has a great ending as well. Definitely worth a quick read. I don't know how you can really rate the classics because they're very of their time. The Vampyre, I would rate 4. It's very short and it's very to the point. There are other classics I like more. That seems mean. Then I realised it had been a very long time since I had read The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And actually to the point where I was like, I definitely read that. I know the story, but I definitely read that, didn't I? Let's read that again. The Yellow Wallpaper is a brilliant story. Again, very short. Again, people class it as a book, as a tale, but you can read it standalone. You can access it online. You can get the little ebook of it if you want to. It is told from the perspective of a young married woman who has been taken by by her husband to this property in the countryside to recuperate. She is unwell. The nature of her illness is vague, and that's very much the point of the story, and I think that's what the author was intending to do with this tale. We have a woman who it seems to be suffering from what they would call at the time melancholia, that maybe she's had a bout of hysteria, maybe she's just depressed. There are references to a child, to a baby that we never see. It is vague, and we get this sense from the start of the book of this woman being in her room. She has been confined to a point to her room for bed rest, and her husband has chosen this room with this very garish to her yellow wallpaper all around it. And she's not entirely happy with it. And it's not really a finished room. And she's very confused as to why the husband didn't give her one of the rooms on the ground floor, another room that was better suited. But he insisted that this one was better for her. They do share a room, but he's not there all of the time. And as she's recuperating, regaining her health, she becomes obsessed and fixated with the yellow wallpaper, with the patterns on the wall. And she believes that she can see things in it. And she starts to have these ideas about what is in the wallpaper. What is there. I won't say any more about the story because, as I said, it is very short. You will get through it quickly, and it is a wonderful story that I highly, highly recommend to people to read it if you're at all interested in Gothic literature. If you're interested in women's literature, this was published in 1892. It has such a modern voice to it, and it's very interesting, as I mentioned, this perspective of this woman and how her thought process changes, the showing of her kind of dipping in and out of kind of real fear, of comfort, of possible mania, of madness. But we just don't know what's wrong with this woman, if anything is wrong with her at all. And you will have question upon question and theories at the end of the story, the way it goes. I loved rereading it, and it made me want to do a reading of it, which I'm hoping to do in the future. And it made me want to go and talk about it with friends about what did you think was happening with her? What do you really think was going on with her? Is there something sinister going on in the house? Is there something with the husband? Is there something in the wallpaper? Is the wallpaper itself? There are so many angles you can go down with the yellow wallpaper. Do read it. It is just a joy. And I'd love to know what people think, or what people lean into thinking what was going on in that room. The Yellow Wallpaper, 5 stars. And sticking with the classics, I promised myself I would reread before the release of the new film, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And I was so glad that I did reread this, that I dove back into it. I refreshed my memory of it because it has been a long time since I read this. I read most of the Gothic classics at university, and yeah, you forget over time. And obviously you're a different person when you're reading it then. And when I was reading at university, I was studying this text to write essays and to take it apart. And you have a whole fresh perspective many, many years later. I think I've shown this before, but this is the Penguin Classic Edition of Frankenstein. This has a lot of introduction. This has got a lot of notes about the writing process. And as I've said before, Frankenstein itself is a short book. It is little. There's a lot of background in here. So you can get through it quickly if you want to, if that is important to you. And it is definitely worth reading the original text to see how different Frankenstein is from the different versions we have been presented on screen. I have talked about this again in a previous video where I was giving you Halloween reads that were based on the Universal monsters. The Frankenstein that we know, Dr. Frankenstein, is the mad scientist working on his creature in a huge castle surrounded by electricity and screaming, "It's alive! It's alive!" Frankenstein's creature, this shuffling, mute figure with bolts in his neck. Obviously that's been adapted over the years, but really the book is a lot quieter, oddly, in its development. The violence is more from the creature, and it's much more a book about loneliness. It is about loneliness and needing friendship and companionship from everyone in the book. From the opening where you have the ship's captain who finds Victor Frankenstein on the ice near death, having been obviously stalked by the creature throughout the events of the book. We get to this point, and then you hear the doctor's story, Victor's story. Technically, people like to point out that actually Victor never graduated from university. And then you have the creature story, the creature who is articulate, who has learned language, is intelligent, emotionally intelligent, and is filled with this variety of emotions that come through so well in the book. And I maintain We've never had a really great faithful adaptation of Frankenstein. There are some very enjoyable Frankenstein films out there. It would just be nice to have one that's really faithful to this in its quiet sadness, in its menace, and in its sort of contemplative nature. Does that make it very bombastic or very enjoyable for cinema? I can understand why people do go really farther in different directions for it. I would just like to see it maybe one day, because there's so much you can do with this text. I have seen the latest adaptation of Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro. It keeps the bones of the creature, of the story, but it does go over the top, and it leans into all sorts of romanticism around it, and it very much is another version of the Frankenstein we've seen in cinema for a long time. I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity, in that so much more could have been drawn out of the text, but people love it. People still love it, and they love the look of it. It looks amazing, that film. Many people will enjoy the film for the look, for the feel. It was an enjoyable watch. I just felt a bit disappointed that I wanted something closer to the text, but that may be boring old me, but Oscar Isaac is brilliant in it. Frankenstein is obviously 5 stars. It's Frankenstein. Let me know if you've read it or if you have reread it recently. Then I dove right back into some paranormal romance, some cozy, spooky spice. Last month I read Best Hex Ever by Nadia El Fassi, and I was sent her latest book, Love at First Fright. This is a story that is from the same universe as that book, The Spice Be Spicin'. In this story, we follow Rosemary, who we did meet briefly in Best Hex Ever, and she is a horror writer, and she's a successful horror writer, and her latest book is being turned into a movie. And she's delighted, and she is a producer, an executive producer on it, and she's going to be part of the process. But then she finds out that Hollywood heartthrob Ellis, a big, brooding guy who's normally being cast in action films and these big bombastic things, and he's being cast as the lead, and she is furious because this is not the vision that she had for her hero. And she's furious that Ellis has been cast, and it doesn't help that he's so hot and that, wow, is he attractive when they first meet each other. It's pretty much enemies to lovers without very high stakes in it, but it's got an adorable setting where you have this film being shot in a big spooky house that is haunted. And one of Rosemary's skills is that she can see ghosts and she can communicate with them. And she finds out that there are these 2 women from the Regency era who were definitely just friends, definitely very close friends, absolutely nothing going on between them whatsoever. And they died tragically, and they are struggling to articulate their friendship to each other. So maybe Rosemary can help. At the same time, her attraction to Ellis and his attraction to her is developing. There are particular tastes that they have, and the secrets that they have that they are worried about sharing with others will inevitably come out. And it's a story about love, about acceptance, about really doing a lot of sex to each other. Absolutely do that. And just how you need to accept who you are and who you love throughout the ages, beyond the realms. There's also a ghost dog in this, and it's so cute. It's just a moment. If you like a spicy book, if you like a cozy paranormal romance, Nadia El Fassi's books are lovely. They are heated, certainly. Please be warned that they are heated. The characters in this are nicely representative. It has got queer elements to it. I enjoyed my time with it. It is light on the scares. I would prefer more horror generally, and I don't read a lot of spice, but I had fun. So I'd want to rate that a 4 star. I would mark it down only because I'd be like, I need more spookiness rather than people doing stuff to each other, which I appreciate. I don't mind. Edging closer to Halloween, I decided to listen to the latest audio adaptation of Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. This is a version that was released on Audible, that's where I listened to it, by Paul Giamatti. I believe it's available on other audio book platforms, and he narrated this book brilliantly. Something Wicked This Way Comes is the story of a carnival that appears mysteriously in a town a few nights before Halloween, bringing Halloween early. We have our 2 young protagonists. We have Jim and Will, who are young boys that are growing up, and they notice the strange things that are happening. And the carnival is not a good carnival. It is very sinister. It has dark magic at the heart of it. It has a dark purpose. And it is a wild, beautiful, dreamlike, strange, and very unsettling story written in Ray Bradbury's inimitable style that is great for Halloween. It's great for any time of year. It's very good. It's a very good autumnal story. I had read this story before when I was younger. I'd read a lot of Ray Bradbury in my youth. It's a story about joy, about happiness, about how you combat the darkness, about people's fear of getting old, of time passing. It's a lot of story about that, of spectacle and what we can point at and kind of laugh at, and what we see as entertainment, and what we should really class as entertainment. Is it something that you should be horrified by? Does it only work if you are frightened by it? It was nice to re-listen to Ray Bradbury after so many years. He conjures worlds with that language, and it's been such an influence on so many horror writers and fantasy writers for years to come. A great spooky tale for autumn, and definitely worth checking out that new audio version. It is a 5-star story and very influential, so it is worth it for that. And finally, the book that was the question mark that I referred to at the beginning, and some of you may have strong feelings about it, and I need you to hold on to yourselves and don't get your pitchforks. I did read Harvest Home. Harvest Home is a book that has been recommended to me for a solid 18 months. I mean, even way before last Halloween. When I get to spooky season in autumn, a lot of people said, have you read Harvest Home? Harvest Home was a book that was written in the 70s, and it is a very autumnal folk horror tale. So people recommend it to me around folk horror time in spring, and they love to recommend it at autumn. And I know so many people reread it and love to revisit it at this time of year. Personally, I did not love the execution of the book, and I feel like it's not a book for me. And it's sometimes I have those recommendations and I tell you guys about it where I don't feel like any criticism that I give of the book will actually be because there's a fault in the book, though I will share some of my thoughts on it. I think it's more that I just knew that this book, the writing style isn't my sort of style. If you don't already know, Harvest Home is the story of a husband, a wife, and their teenage daughter who have been living in New York, and they've been stressed out, the family's sort of falling apart, and they end up relocating to a place called Cornwall Coombe in Connecticut. This idyllic pastoral village where everyone is happy and everyone is sort of adhering to the old ways of tending the land, of looking after livestock and the crops. They're welcoming to the couple, but they're not fond of outsiders. They want to do things their way, and they don't like outward interference. They will very much keep to themselves, and they expect anyone who moves into the community to do the same. The community is overseen by the wonderful figure of Widow Fortune, and I did really like her. And there's sort of characters and people who are very smiley and shady in that old kind of folk horror tradition in there. Living in the area, their lives immediately improve. It's idyllic, it's wonderful. The daughter's asthma is not as bad, and when she does have an attack, she is saved by the local methods rather than rushing her to a hospital or to a doctor. There are things that are a little bit unsettling, such as the approach of choosing the corn maiden and the rituals that they have around the harvest, and these figures and sacrificing animals a little bit, and choosing the harvest lord. What does that involve? What does that involve? And there's also underlying tension with one or two other people in Cornwall Coombe about the fact that you can't really leave the community and what is expected of you as time goes on. That's as much as I'll say about the plot, and there is a lot more going on in the plot. There's all sorts of intricacies in it, which I did appreciate. This takes a long time to get into, the book. It does really linger for a long time on the pastoral setting, and I found the writing of it a little bit bloated, I'll say. It was sort of really caught up in its own reverence for the pastoral scenery, if you want to call it that way. It's a very complicated way of saying it. But then when the action starts, it was good. It was good folk horror content. You know, things get very dark, very twisted. I didn't like Ned, the father and the husband, and I appreciate that we're probably not supposed to like some of the decisions that he makes without giving away spoilers in there. Some of the decisions and some of his actions and some of his attitude, you're not supposed to like it. I'm not sure that the right balance was struck, honestly, with really feeling uncomfortable about him, and at other points in the book we were supposed to agree with him. I feel like we were sort of being nudged that his judgment was good, and then it was lapsed, and then it didn't feel like it was being a very human story. It just felt a bit caricatured. Again, that's just my feeling of it. But the folk horror story and the tension of it was good when it started to get going, and I did want to know what was the secret of Cornwall Coombe, what was being hidden. So I enjoyed that element of it. I just feel like this book, yes, it's a good story. It wasn't for me in the execution. I could nitpick and find more fault with it, and I could discuss it. But it's just one of those instincts where I go, the style of this wasn't for me. and it will be for other people, and I wouldn't want to detract from their enjoyment of it. It does make me want to go and watch the miniseries. I know it's available on YouTube, I think it is, with Bette Davis in it, wonderful icon that she is. So I'd like to see the adaptation of it, and I understand that's a very faithful version of it. The book, I spent my time with it. I'm glad that I learned the story of it, and I'm glad that I had the experience, and thank you to everyone who's recommended it. It's just one of those where I got through it quicker because I wasn't having a great time with elements of it. I started some other books in October, and I haven't completed them, and they're not hard DNFs, but I have paused. One of them is the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre. I mentioned this one in my spooky season TBR, my hopeful TBR list. A new book that is about a massacre, about a serial killer slasher set in a retirement home. I started reading an advanced copy of that. I put it down because, again, the writing style wasn't grabbing me. Something about the story wasn't quite grabbing me, but I have seen a lot of people that I know and I respect their reviews of saying it gets really good. It's a really good story. I think I'm going to switch to audio on that one because people have said the audiobook of it is great. So hopefully I will be able to bring a review of that in the future. I've just shelved it for now. Not a hard DNF. There you go. That is my October reading wrap up. All the books that I got through, I'm sure there were others that I started in there and just forgot to mention. This video has been fun to shoot, given that my camera just kept moving very, very slightly at different points. It was a fun but busy reading month for me because I had a huge amount of work on. I had a lot to do and a lot to prepare for, so I am very much looking forward to the quiet of November. November is the start of the dark half of the year, and it is a great time to slow down wherever you are able to. I appreciate that people say switch off and just take it easy and hunker down, and people have jobs, people have responsibilities, people have a lot of stresses. And I am thinking of you, and I wish you well if you are stressed at this moment. And all I can say is, where you can, give yourself time to rest, to reset, get as close to hibernation as humanly possible, and enjoy the books you're reading. November for me will be all about just reading the books that I fancy. I am completely being led by my mood. I have got some great ones that have been sitting on my shelf that I have been saving for the dark half of the year, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you my updates on them. If you don't already, please do follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on TikTok, where I do shorter videos, some of which I release here on Shorts, and subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, hit like for this video, and leave a comment. And if you have suggestions of videos you'd like to see from me in the future, or you need specific book recommendations, just let me know. Stay spooky, bye-bye.